Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for actually joining us for today's Sussex thesis session for International Relations and International Development. My name is Janice, and I'm one of the recruitment managers working for Study Group. And together with us, we actually have Dr. Nicholas Whitaker, who's actually one of our tutors over at Sussex ISC, teaching this particular course. So we're just going to give about maybe 1 or 2 minutes more for more of our participants to start streaming in before we begin the session. While we wait, just a gentle reminder to all that this session is being recorded, and at the end of the day, the recording will be made available to you based on your registered email address. Alongside with the recording, you will also receive a copy of the deck of slides that will be shared by Dr. Whitaker later on. So don't need to worry about taking down any notes or screenshots because you will have the entire deck of slides for your easy reference. Now, this session is going to be a very fun and interactive one, so we do encourage active participation. There will be some platforms that's going to be used, and namely, we're going to use the Woo Clap. The specific instructions we will actually let you guys know. So do get your handy handphones ready, cell phones ready if there's a requirement for that, so you can actually participate in this session. Now, if you have any questions throughout this whole entire presentation, there is a Q&A chat box function available at the bottom of your screen. Now, if for whatever reason you are not able to reach out for the Q&A chat box, the chat function should be available as well. So feel free to drop in any of your questions along the way. We may answer during the presentation or at the end where we have a Q&A session in itself. Now, for some reason, if let's say the mic function is available to you, please keep your mics on mute throughout this whole presentation so that we can have a smooth presentation. All right, so we are 2 minutes in after 11 a.m. So without further ado, I'm actually going to invite Dr. Whitaker to hand this over to him. Dr. Whitaker, over to you.
Hey, thank you so much, Janice. It's really great to kind of see you all today, and I'm looking forward to hopefully seeing you all in a real classroom sometime soon, whether that's in September or January. So I'm going to share my screen and then we will get on with what I've got planned for you today. So yes, this is a taster session for international development and international relations at the University of Sussex ISC. Now, you're all, it looks like you're all intending to come here, so I don't need to labor this point too hard, but just to remind you what a fantastic place this is to study international development and international relations. At the University of Sussex, we are the #1 place in the world to study international development. Nothing more needs to be said about that, really. In terms of international relations, it's really, really strong as well. 91% of the international relations research that is produced at Sussex is judged to be either world-leading or internationally excellent. So this is a fantastic place to come and study these things. What I'm going to do today, what I'm going to present today in this taster class is a topic that I think kind of exists at the intersection of both international relations and international development. Okay, so it's a topic that kind of touches on both of these things. In our courses at the ISC, which you're welcome to ask me about later, in our courses at the ISC, you'll probably likely be studying some international relations and some international development. There's a massive crossover between the two of them. So the topic I wanted to choose for this taster session today was something that was going to kind of touch on both of these areas, really. So I've chosen to think about civil wars and development. And what we're going to try and discover today is to think about what civil wars are, how they start, factors that increase their length, how war affects development, how warfare is linked to development, and this really important theoretical idea of conflict traps. So you'll have the opportunity to contribute shortly. I want to hear your ideas about this, and the rest of the time I'm going to be taking you through what I've prepared. So let's start by defining what exactly we mean by conflict. What do we mean by war? It's always important when we're coming to a new topic to try and think about the terms that we're using. So we can define conflict or war as a violent clash or a series of clashes between two or more groups. These groups could be things that are attached to a state in the international system. So, for example, an army or the security forces of a particular state. So the French army or the British army, the American army, so on and so on. But another group that could be involved in a conflict or a war could be a group from within a state or across several states. So when we talk about this, we're talking about things like militias, warlords, rebel groups, guerrilla groups, or indeed private security firms. If you've been following the news lately when it comes to Russia, Ukraine, and the Wagner Group, this is an example of a private security firm that was taking part in modern warfare. So what's the difference between a conflict and a war? Because we've just been using these two terms already in this first slide. Well, according to the Correlates of War, which is an organization that codifies these things, they've suggested that in order for something to be a war rather than a conflict, there has to be more than 1,000 deaths across a calendar year. So sometimes we hear things referred to as wars, and sometimes we hear things referred to as conflicts. Usually a conflict will be something where there was fewer than 1,000 deaths across that period. So, for example, the Falklands conflict of 1982. That is why it is named as such. So in terms of different types of conflict, the two main types that we would think about in our studies, we'll be thinking about interstate and civil or internal conflicts. Civil or internal conflicts is what we're mostly going to be thinking about in this short taster session today. So interstate conflict is the classic warfare that we think about between two or more states fighting one another. So, for example, World War II or the Iran-Iraq War of the 1980s. This is a phenomenon that has generally been held to be in decline in recent decades, although Russia-Ukraine very much shows that they're still possible. Okay, we have this classic interstate conflict where one sovereign state has invaded another sovereign state. This is what we call an interstate conflict. Civil or internal conflicts are a lot more common. These are conflicts that take place between two or more groups within a state. So, for example, a really old historical example would be the Spanish Civil War of the 1930s. We've also got at the moment the Sudanese conflict, which erupted this year. This is a civil war because there's several different groups within Sudan that are fighting one another. Globalization tends to mean that they are not always confined to just one state anymore. So often a civil war actually becomes something called an intrastate war, which we will look at shortly. So the importance of studying this is demonstrated by this infographic here. So as of April the 28th, this is a map showing the countries in the world in which armed clashes between state forces and or rebels were reported in 2023. So look at the huge spread of places in which there's essentially some form of civil conflict going on. Also, team, please take note of the fact that much of this civil conflict is taking place. I don't know if you can see where my mouse is moving. I don't know if you can see my cursor, but it's taking place across this central band of the world. So a little bit here in South America, but a huge swathe of Africa, the Middle East, South Asia, the Indian subcontinent, Southeast Asia, Indonesia, and so on. This is the former colonial world. This is the part of the world that tends to be less developed than Western Europe, North America, Australia, even East Asia as well. So this is the poorer part of the world, generally in terms of development, that is experiencing lots of civil wars, civil conflicts. An example here, the Somali Civil War that's been going on in one form or another since 1978 or thereabouts. And you can see on this slide just a pictorial representation of the fact that essentially the Somalian state that exists in the international system is split up into several different parts that are fighting one another. And it's showing no signs of being able to be sorted out anytime soon. And that's longer than I've been alive for the Somali Civil War has been occurring for. So note the different actors that are involved here. Note the fact that there's a number of different actors, local actors, regional actors that are involved in this. Another example, what happened particularly from 2014 onwards within Iraq and Syria. This is an example of an intra-state conflict. So you can see how it's like a civil conflict that's actually kind of spread across between two states. Iraq and Syria, the states themselves, were not at war with one another, but the conflict with its multiple different actors, Syrian forces, Iraqi forces, the Islamic State group, Kurdish groups and rebel groups, all fighting amongst one another across the international state boundaries. So a question that we want to try and answer today, a question that we want to try and figure out is, why are there more civil wars in the less developed world? Why is it that we see more civil conflict occurring in poorer parts of the world than in places like Western Europe, North America, East Asia? Okay, so that's a little bit of talking from me. Now I'm going to hand it over to you to just give me some ideas, to generate some ideas. This is something that we do at the ISC. It's not always just one-way traffic. We really want students to be contributing. So I'd like you to think about this and try and answer the question for me. You can respond as many times as you like to this question: what causes civil wars? I don't want you to look anything up. I don't want you to do any research for this. This is about what you already know, what you already think about this question. There's no right or wrong here, okay? WooClap is anonymous in any case, right? But I would love to see what you guys think about this question. What causes a civil war? Why would a civil war start in a given state? What do you think the triggers might be for a war or a conflict to occur within a state? So you can just use that QR code, as I'm sure you're all familiar with how to do that. And I'm going to set this going. We'll have about 2 minutes in which to add your responses. I'm just going to start that off. And I might just have to reset that. That's annoying that it's done that. Oh dear. Okay. Perhaps we could use the chat function instead, because this WooClap. Oh no, here we go. Here we go. Just bear with me one moment. I'm just going to sort this out. Oh, okay, thanks for your patience, team. We should be good to go now. WooClap is working. Thank you so much. So we should be good to go now. 2 minutes. Join via this QR code, and away we go.
For those who are not able to access the WooClap for whatever reason, the chat function is available. Please make sure that you actually, the audience, please direct it to everyone so that we can also see your responses as well.
Yes, please. That's great. Thanks, Janice.
So welcome.
I will share it again. Haven't got any responses so far, so happy to share that again. Maybe we can get some responses. Just give it another minute or so. Okay, maybe we've got a little bit of a shy. Could you share the Q? Yeah, please feel free. Yeah, maybe we've got a little bit of a shy group today. Not to worry. I know I've put everybody on the spot here by.
I think that some of our respondents or participants have actually put in a response. It might not have been captured. So. Our apologies, but no worries. The chat box function is available. So some of our participants have actually included their responses inside the chat box as well. So feel free to actually type in the chat box using the Zoom chat function. That would work as well.
Yeah, great.
So we have two
resources
right now. Yep.
Fantastic. So I've got a response from Adiemi who's saying resources might be a reason why there is a civil conflict. Absolutely, that's fantastic. I appreciate your response there. Resources, absolutely. Different groups within society competing around. And indeed, just different groups could be competing about who owns which resource within a society. Absolutely, that is a classic way for a conflict to start that could erupt into violence. Absolutely, if you have a state disputes, that can lead to conflict that can turn to violence. Leadership, thank you, Samad. That is a great suggestion. So the leadership of a country might be acting in a particular way that alienates a certain group within a society. Religion, fantastic. Thank you so much. Yeah, so the leadership within a society could potentially be a particular religion. They perhaps persecute another element of society, which is a different religion. So sectionalism from Afra, yeah, absolutely. So different groups within society competing against one another. Fantastic. That's really, really good. The old ways are the best. Why didn't we just use the chat function straight away rather than trying to use
We do have some responses in the Q&A chat as well. It's a very interactive group today, actually. We have difference in ideologies and culture, intervention, coups, and everything. So, yep, it's a very interactive group today.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I can see that now. Yeah, so differences in ideologies and culture. Yeah, absolutely. We sort of covered that. Sometimes intervention and resource needs from outside countries. Fantastic. Yeah, and military coups as well of various kinds. Top stuff. Brilliant. I'm really, really pleased with that. Thank you for your participation. Right. So if I just expand this, that will do. Yeah. So research shows that conflicts tend to be more likely if wealth and or incomes are extremely unequal and the average income is very low. Okay. So this makes the cost of sustaining a rebellion against the central government low, and is often found in societies with weak governments themselves, because the government is less able to suppress whatever civil conflict is occurring. Okay, so if you have a poorer society, research shows that you're more likely to have a civil war. This can be something to do with resentments between different groups. As you guys have already identified, different groups who feel resentment towards other groups because they feel like they have more than, or they have less than another group. Civil conflicts, civil wars are far more likely if there are two or more distinct ethnic groups. This means that mobilizing support for one of these groups is a lot easier. If you can appeal to the idea of we are this group, they are that group, then you're far more likely to have a civil conflict rather than in a society like Japan, for example, where Japan is a very ethnically homogenous society. I think it's 98 or 99% of people who live in Japan are ethnically Japanese. How would you mobilize support for a civil conflict in and amongst that based on ethnicity? You'd find that difficult. So there's huge links between war and development. States experiencing some sort of civil war lose on average 2.2% of their normal annual growth rate. Research has shown that on average, civil war will last 7 years. So the per capita income can be 15% lower than it might have been as a result of that civil war. This loss of income can prolong the conflict because it increases grievances between the different groups that are fighting one another. It increases hardship and poverty. This then increases opportunities for criminality. You see the grey economies and the black economies growing as part of civil conflicts that are occurring. Financial and economic institutions can take a lot of time to recover after civil wars, leaving societies really, really broken as a result of this. So we're starting to see here these links that can help us to answer that earlier question of why do we tend to see more civil conflicts in less developed parts of the world? Lots of research has shown the importance of military spending and to do with civil wars as well. Military budgets, understandably, tend to increase by about 50% during an average civil war. It often proves really, really hard to cut this spending after a war has concluded. There's a perception in some of these societies that peace needs to be kept by maintaining lots of defense forces. The military lobby is often reluctant to see defense spending reduced. Of course, that's what lobbies do. They argue that spending in their area ought to be increased. And if rebel forces are being incorporated into existing armed forces, this means that there's extra spending that will take place in that regard. And several studies here from the 1990s have shown that military spending tends to actually reduce growth while also making a relapse into conflict more likely. If a society is spending a lot on their military, it sends a signal that any peace agreement might not actually be adhered to. Confidence is reduced in the government. Private sector investors are less likely to come to that country to invest because they don't have confidence that that society is going to remain peaceful and stable. Wars fundamentally change societies. Again, that's an obvious point, but it's one that we need to make. If there's been warfare within a society, it could be because of these, religious reasons or ethnic reasons. The hatreds between these groups is only going to be intensified by that warfare because of the violence that's occurred. Some may feel that the outcomes of the war were unjust. Okay, so one group might feel that the other group had committed war crimes during the war and they haven't been held to account afterwards. This only makes warfare more and more likely once you've had a civil war. I'm just going to respond to that Q&A. So the world at war in 2023 seen as a world war similar to the previous World War II in Europe, or will it be seen as separate wars because it's different countries for different reasons? That is a really good question. There's a historical question here, isn't it? About whether we see a series of conflicts together as being one big conflict or not. So I can't really satisfactorily answer that at the moment, in the sense that we don't know how history is going to judge it. We might look back in the future on World War II and change our ideas about what World War II is, whether it was actually several different conflicts or whether it was just one conflict. But that's a great question, and it's exactly the kind of question that we really get into in a lot of detail when you're studying IR and ID with us. Yeah. Wars have another really significant effect on society. So the value of activities associated with warfare will be a lot higher as a result of how the economy has changed. Activities that are associated with peace just don't have that same value in a society that is engaged in conflict. Furthermore, criminal entrepreneurs who profited from the war, because remember we saw earlier about how warfare and the instability that warfare causes means that there's a growth in the grey and the black economies. Criminal entrepreneurs who profited from the war will be richer and in a more powerful position at the end of the conflict. And if there's more criminality within a society, we know that there's more likely to be warfare because of disputes about resources and so on. Here's an example. The famous example of Sierra Leone and its blood diamonds. So there's been some movies made about this and so on. Civil war in Sierra Leone in West Africa, which ran throughout the 1990s, was partly financed by the sale of diamonds, which one group, Revolutionary United Front, they particularly exploited this. So what's important to remember here is that this war was not simply driven by a greed for profits from the diamonds. There was also political exclusion, deteriorating living conditions. This led a lot of people to join the rebellion against the Sierra Leonean government. But this diamond economy that erupted during the war didn't represent a radical departure. So Sierra Leone was already exporting diamonds. And the point here is that many developing countries or less developed countries are dependent upon the extraction of resources and exporting them. This, though, can lead to more conflict, okay? Because in a lot of these places, in a lot of less developed societies, the extraction and export of resources will be dominated by one group or another, leading to resentment from the other groups, from the rival groups, which is ideal conditions for a conflict to erupt in. All of this situation leads us to this concept developed by Paul Collier, who's a very influential name in all of this. This idea of conflict traps. Okay, so states get trapped in conflicts that just keep on going, and it's really, really hard to escape from them. And he found in one of his studies that as states approach the end of a civil war, they face a nearly 50% chance of reverting to warfare. So if you're already in a situation of conflict, there's a good chance you're going to go back into it even when it's over with. This is something that much of the developing world is faced with. So that's probably enough for me, so I'm going to round it up. So we've looked at what civil wars are today, and we've given a couple of examples of places like Somalia. We've talked about how they started, and you all came up with some really good ideas to do with economic resources, to do with potentially religious or ethnic conflicts, to do with leadership within societies as well. Then we've looked at factors that can increase the length of these wars, such as the growth of criminality. We've looked at the links between civil wars and development, the fact that civil war actually holds down development. So if you're in a situation of conflict, your development is going to be lessened in the first place. And then we touched on this idea, bringing it all together, of conflict traps, this idea of societies and states getting trapped, getting stuck in situations of conflict that can potentially last many, many decades. So this is just one of the fascinating topics that you can study if and when you choose to do IR and ID with us at the University of Sussex, ISC. This is exactly the kind of thing that me and my excellent colleagues do. So I hope you enjoyed listening to that. There is my bibliography. There's the reference list, because I'm a very good boy and I always reference properly whenever I do any work. So really, really happy to take any questions from you.
All right, thank you so much. It's a very good insight about conflicts and wars. I never knew about all those, insightful topics about conflict. To me, it's just war and conflicts. I didn't know there was such great detail behind that. So thank you for such an amazing session. So, and thank you guys for actually participating in the Q&As, and there's a lot of good active participation. It was really lovely. Now, if you have any questions about the course, about international relations and international development, Dr. Whitaker is actually the best person to actually answer any of your questions. Now, if you have questions about your study in Sussex ISC, what kind of support there is provided for you as a student, both Dr. Whitaker and myself, we will be able to support you as best as we can. So please have your questions answered. This is a very good opportunity to have your questions asked during this time. All right, we have our very first question. How much is the acceptance rate of University of Sussex? Are you referring to the international relations pathway, or are you referring to the overall? If you are referring to the overall progression rate, we are still in the midst of finalizing, because our January intake students have just about wrapped up their last few classes with us. So the finalized progression numbers have not been set yet. But if you are asking for the last year's progression rate, if I remember correctly, should be about 93%, if I remember correctly. So that was the last year's 2022 to 2023 intake year. So hope that helps. All right, we have a couple of questions to go. Really interesting topic. Thank you. What other types of topics will we also study? Now, before I hand this time over to Dr. Whitaker, just to let you guys know, if you're choosing like the foundation pathway with us, you do need to take a compulsory English module, which is the AES, the Academic English Skills. And then alongside with the relevant modules and relevant subjects to your course. So for international relations and international development, Dr. Whitaker, do you have any idea what kind of topics will they study?
Yeah, thank you. So it does rather depend on which pathway you're taking. I realize we could have foundation students here, we could have international year 1 students, and we could have pre-master students here as well. So I'll try and just be really, really brief. But if you're studying international, so for the international relations courses, you're doing these big kind of systemic questions of kind of international power kind of thing. So how does power work in the international system? That might require looking at the leaders of different societies. That might require looking at things like nuclear weapons. It might require looking at things like international institutions like the United Nations, the way that global governance works. There's theoretical elements to this as well. So we look at all these present international issues through the lenses of gender, for example, through the lenses of post-colonialism, through the lens of Marxism, through liberalism, through constructivism. That's kind of the international, but there's, the wonderful thing about international relations is that you can really study anything that's happening in the world. And I mean that truly, you can study anything. When I'm teaching you next year, you'll get to know that one of my favorite things is football, and you can look at the international relations of football. You can look at the links between international development and football. So there's a huge variety of different things that we can study. And yeah, I won't go into too much into detail about the different pathways, but there's, yeah.
All right, that sounds great. So, all right. So let's move on to the second question. I've applied for Sussex, and that's great. Welcome. And when is the deadline for the payment for the undergraduate for September 2023 intake? So this, I will take it. So in terms of the payment deadline, it should be listed out in your financial statement. Do take note that since you're going for the September 2023 intake, we are cutting really close to the recruitment timeline that we are looking at. Ideally, you should be cast ready by mid-August. If not the last week of August, so that we can actually provide you with a visa document on time and for you to apply the visa on time. Now, this is based on the standard visa processing timeline. Of course, if your country offers priority visa, the deadline is a little bit later. So if you would like to know more specific details, if you are represented by an agent, please do reach out to your agent and your agent will reach out to us. And if not, then you can always feel free to actually drop an email back to the email when you will be receiving the recording and the slides. We will be able to respond back to you directly. But the general rule of thumb is by mid-August, you should be ready. Please refer to our financial statement for your payment plan. All right, what's the progression rate for medicine from ISC Sussex? This is a very interesting one. We're talking about international relations and international development. I don't have the final numbers for you as of this time, but please do keep a lookout towards the end of the year if you wish. By then we should have a more concrete set of numbers. All right. Is there still time to apply for September 2023? Yes, there is still time. So I hope that the session was a great one that has inspired and motivate you to actually apply for September 2023. There is still time. Please do submit your application as soon as you can, whether is it through an agent or whether is it through our direct sales team. All right. What modules are there in science and engineering foundation years? Just like what Dr. Whitaker has said, it really depends on the pathway that you are looking at. I highly recommend that you actually take a look at our website. So I'm just going to share my screen really quickly and I'm just going to show you how the website looks like. So just give it a moment for the session I believe everybody should be able to see my screen now. So I have actually listed down International Foundation Year in Science and Engineering. And as you can see right at the bottom, you will be able to see the modules that you will be covering. So usually semester 1 modules are introductory modules and math basic modules, which everyone will have to take. And then semester 2 modules, those are the modules that will be dependent on your chosen pathway, whether you are going for computing, engineering, life sciences, or psychology. So all this information, you will be able to find it on our website, or you can just Google Sussex ISC. You will be able to be directed to that website. All right. Let's see. Okay, what are some of the variety of career paths, career prospects, I believe? So Dr. Whitaker, you might want to actually shed some light on this.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a really, really great question. So we're very, very focused on developing your skills here at the Sussex International Study Centre. It's my aim in teaching you is not for you to finish the course being able to repeat a load of facts or historical dates or anything. My aim is for you to have an incredible set of skills. And this is not just me, this is all of my colleagues. Aim is for you to have this incredible set of skills that you can then take into the job market and pursue the career that you would like to do. So people who study international relations and international development often have aspirations to go and work in NGOs, international charities. London, if you want to stay in London after, if you want to stay in the UK after your studies, and obviously the University of Sussex is very, very close to London. You can be in London in less than an hour. London is a real hub for international development charities and agencies. So there is loads of work in London if you're interested in any kind of project to do with the developing world. Students also often want to work in political or international relations think tanks as well, again, which London has just an absolutely colossal amount of these think tanks. Students will sometimes study IR and ID and then do a conversion and go and work in international law. I was just talking to a student who's just graduated. She studied the International Year 1 course with us really, really successfully. She's just finished, she's just graduated from International Relations and International Development at Sussex. She's now applying for a master's at Sussex in International Financial Law. So she's converting it down to, she's converting it in that way. If you get a really good degree from Sussex, if you get a first or a 2-1, which is the top 2 degree classifications from the University of Sussex, your career options are endless because Sussex is an excellent university. And if you get those top classifications of degree, you're going to be very desirable in the job market.
Indeed, you will be very desirable. All right, so moving on to the next question, what eligibility should I have to get scholarship? Well, of course, academic merit is the top of the list. And we also do look at your interest in enrolling in University of Sussex. So usually, your keenness to study alongside with good academic merits that would usually warrant you quite a high chance to actually obtain the scholarship. So for any scholarship related, if you would like to apply for scholarships, we have a very generous amount. We actually have up to 3,500 British pounds for our foundation year and international year one students. So if you are interested, please reach out to your study group representative if there is any, or if not, reach out to your agent and your agent will help you apply accordingly. All right, let's move on to the next one. And that is, so there's another medicine foundation pathway. I'm going to move on to the next one. With regards to the contact, I'm actually going to put my email for everyone. And you can actually reach out for the medicine student. You can actually reach out to me there. And then I will be able to pick it up. And if I can't answer it, I will direct you to the correct person to be answering your questions. All right, next one. How about the on-campus accommodation in Sussex, and which one would you suggest for the freshers? Just a gentle reminder for students who are going on the pathway program with us, regardless whether it's a foundation, international year one, or pre-masters, accommodation with Sussex is with a third party. It is not on campus. It is with a partner called Student Route, which is, to my knowledge, about 10 to 15 minutes away from the ISC, walkable distance, so you don't have to travel too far away. And it's a really nice, good place, very nicely furnished. And yeah, so that would be the ideal place for our students to go to for accommodation. If you would like to opt for private accommodation, you are definitely allowed to. Please make sure that you don't stay more than 1 hour away from the ISC. Okay. Now, so this is a good one. Can international students studying in University of Sussex also work part-time in the university itself? Dr. Whitaker, I'm not sure if you can help me out on this one.
Yes, you can. That is the simple answer. Yeah, you have the right to work a certain number of hours. Don't test me on the number of hours. It's not full-time hours, but you all will have the right to work a certain number of hours. And there are some jobs in the University of Sussex itself. I'd say there's more jobs in Brighton. Brighton's a city of 250,000 people, so it's not huge, but there's there is enough going on there. There is loads and loads of jobs in Brighton, especially when you get to summertime as well, but round about Christmas and the winter holidays too. So if you're looking for work, you won't struggle to find it.
Well, I'm just going to add on to that question, because we all, obviously everyone was going to pursue a university education. We are looking to advance our career prospects. So are there any opportunities for internships, maybe inside the university or even in Brighton? Are there internships available for international relations students?
There are. So if you, as a study group student, as an International Study Centre student, you have access to all of the same facilities that University of Sussex students have. And that includes the excellent careers hub that we have at the University of Sussex. So you have access to that, and they will be very happy to help you gain any internships that are available. So and yeah, studying something like international relations and international development, these are pathways that are very attractive. So yeah, take advantage of all of these things. Talk to your tutors and say, what is this careers hub? We don't arrange these things within the ISC, but like I say, they are available to you. It's all on the same campus, 5 minutes walk from the building that we live in. And they're hugely experienced, dedicated staff who arrange these things for students.
Awesome. Great. So now comes to the reading part, because we have a lot of ambitious students here. They would like to get all the prep work done. So there are a few questions coming in. Are there any things you would advise we read before our course?
So I really think that because these courses are so brilliant and they're so varied, I think take advantage of the period before you start studying to read about some areas that you're particularly interested in, or that you feel that you maybe don't know that much about. I'm not going to sit here and say, this is a required piece of reading or that is a required piece of reading, because that's not exactly how this area of study works, right? I couldn't name one book and say, that's the thing you have to read. There are textbooks available. So there's a couple of good textbooks that I can maybe if Janice is answering the next question, I'll just take a minute just to write down the name of a couple of good textbooks. These provide a really general introduction if you want to, but there's nothing you have to read. But I would say take this time to think, right, why am I wanting to study international relations or international development? What's the thing that interests me the most? And then do a deep dive into that. You're very welcome to send me an email if something occurs to you. Very welcome to send me an email and say, hey Nick, I'm interested in nuclear weapons, for example. What's a good thing to read around that, and I can have a chat with you about that. Even before you've started. But yeah, take this opportunity to have some fun and just engage in those areas that you're really interested in.
That's a very good advice. Well, so for the next question, as the meeting is being recorded, can we save the video too? To my understanding, yes, you are able to, but because the file is relatively big and I believe there is an expiry to the link, so please do adhere to the expiry date so that you can at least save the video for future reference. Now, okay, so the next question was similar. Also during the course for international development, would you advise any particular books, podcasts, or news we keep up? So Dr. Whitaker, you might want to leave your email if you're comfortable in the chat box for them to reach out to you. And okay, so we have another astrophysics question. So we just really want to focus our attention on international relations and international development here. We may in the future arrange for something related to physics, but if you're asking questions about career prospects, I believe, for Dr. Whitaker and myself, we probably would not be able to advise, but students who are going for astrophysics, they will also be eligible to go for the career support services that we have in Sussex as well. If you are talking about the course materials, because both of us, we don't teach astrophysics as well, but I believe there will be someone available there that can reach out to you. So if you would like, you can also reach out to me by email. If you would like someone to actually have a word with you, we can see what we can do to arrange a session. All right, next one. I am coming to the UK in September. Will it be possible for individuals to stay in accommodation before the course start? If you are asking, can you stay on campus accommodation? The answer is no. But if we're talking about staying in our study group accommodation, the one that I mentioned earlier, the student roost accommodation, the answer is yes. So you would actually have to confirm your payment, confirm your place with us, and then our accommodation team will be sending you a link for you to proceed with booking your accommodation. Now, the check-in dates and everything will be dependent on you, dependent on when you're flying into the UK. So the good thing about third-party accommodation providers is that they tend to have a little bit more flexible check-in dates. So do just, wait for the accommodation link to actually be sent to you for you to start booking your accommodation. Now, I don't advise checking online, like going to Student Roost directly, because the calendar dates are a little bit different. We have an exclusive agreement with Student Roost on this, so whatever dates that they have available for us may not be reflected on their usual public domain website. All right, that's quite a handful of questions that we have gone through thus far. So let's just see if we have not missed out anybody else. Ooh. Okay, so Dr. Whitaker has actually listed down some of the textbooks and his email as well, just to kickstart everybody for this amazing international relations and international development journey. Now, while we wait to see if there are any more questions to come in, we still have about 10 minutes more. I do have a quick question for Dr. Whitaker. So if a student for international relations and international development, what is something that they need to take note of in order to be successful in this course and graduate on this course?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So if you just show up and you engage with your tutors and you form that relationship with your tutors, you take in everything that is there in the class, it's very, very hard to go wrong. Okay, so that would be the first bit of advice. When it comes to your assessments, because unfortunately it's not just classes. We do have to come to assessments. When you come to assessments, things like writing essays, okay, try and see them as an opportunity, okay, rather than a punishment, which is, I think, what some students might sort of see them as. See them as an opportunity to research something that you're really interested in and to show off the amazing skills that you're developing. Start your assessments nice and early. Talk to your tutors. Remember, it's your tutors who are going to be marking your assessments. So if you can form that relationship with them and really, really find out exactly what's needed to be successful, I think it's very, very difficult to go wrong. And let me tell you, I know we've had questions about progression rates and so on. I can't quote a figure at you, but our rates of progression within IRID, within the larger kind of social sciences and law bit, our rates of progression are very, very high. I can only think of 1 or 2 students ever that I've taught. I've been working at the Sussex ISC since 2017, January 2017. I can only think of 1 or 2 students ever who have not progressed. Okay, so if you join us, you're going to progress to Sussex. Okay, it's, you know, that's the reality. As long as you put the work in, but everybody tends to, because it's a fascinating course and people are really engaged in it.
That's great to hear. How about the challenges? I mean, since you've been here in study group since 2017, that's like a good 6 years of journey with us. You know, throughout your experience of teaching students, you know, what is one challenge that you see that students face? You know, when they're approaching this topic, and what can they do to overcome it? Yeah,
so I think often we get students who are faced with, you know, that when you're doing a social science, which you know, IR and ID, they are part of the larger social science world. When you're doing social science courses, the reality is most of what you're doing is reading. Okay, that is, you know, 90% of your time studying these courses into year 2 and year 3, it is basically reading. Students can often be really, really daunted when they arrive. Maybe their English is not at a sort of a perfect kind of level. They'll often be really daunted and quite intimidated by seeing these really big, really dense academic texts. And students will say, well, I don't, you know, I can't, you know, it's taking me about 8 hours to read the full text. One of the things that we really, really try and get across to students is that across the time when they're with us, if you can try and relax a little bit around reading, that's really, really important. So you take your reading very seriously, but accept that you might not have to read every single word of an article or a book or a chapter or whatever. These are skills that we can really help you with. So it's very, very common. I get students, they start and they go, oh, you know, how am I going to do this? There's far too much reading. By the end, they're really, really confident about what they need to get from a text. What are the techniques to get what they need from a text in order to be successful in their assessment? But yeah, that's a really common kind of, that's a really common sort of challenge, I think.
Thank you for the advice as well. So, I mean, we don't really have much of the questions left in the Q&A chat box. So for those people who are interested in, you know, getting to know a little bit more about Sussex, you can find them on our website, Sussex ISC. And if you have any queries, please drop us an email. We do have a series of other taster sessions coming up next week, specifically life sciences and computing. Our marketing team has actually put the links in the chat box as well. Now, for our existing offer holders, we look forward to seeing you in Sussex very soon. And Dr. Whitaker will be also excited to be seeing you very soon as well. So do remember to submit all your relevant documents. And also please take note that we have a pre-arrival session for our September 2023 intake offer holders. It is scheduled to be on the 14th of August 2023. Please look out to your inbox. You should be receiving a link by now. If you have not, please reach out to us. We are more than happy to send the registration link to you. Now, we're just going to stay a little bit more. We are just about 5 minutes left to the session itself. So both Dr. Whitaker and myself will stay a little bit longer if there are any more further questions. If you do not have any other questions, we are so glad to have you here. Dr. Whitaker, any parting words for them?
No, just as it was really fantastic to see you here, really fantastic to see you participating, fantastic to see how patient you all were as well. I really appreciate your patience with, I was just assuring everybody before we started this session, I said, no, I don't need to check WooClap because I tried it earlier and it was fine. And then it didn't work. So thanks loads for your patience. Absolutely delighted to see your intelligent, enthusiastic responses. And I can't wait to see you in a classroom in September. Yeah.
All right.
Enjoy the rest of your summers.
Yep. Enjoy, and for wherever you are at, have a great day ahead. And for our upcoming students who are going for September, welcome to Sussex. We can't wait to see you very soon. Have a great one, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.